So now I'm going to teach you how to build one. However, these plans are for DIY Fitness Club members only. So to join the club, all you got to do is go down below, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and you're in the club. You do those two things and you're in the club. How easy was that? So step one is the pad itself. Now I paid less than $30 for this pad. It's pretty dense foam inside, the stitching's nice. I like almost everything about it. The best part is it's 23 inches across, okay? Most of the pads at this price point are actually gonna be 16 inches or less, which is far too narrow in my opinion. Okay, so now that we've selected our pad, I'm gonna go ahead and flip it over, and we are going to measure it to determine the dimensions of the 11 32 thick piece of plywood I'm going to put here. So it looks like, even though it's advertised at 23 inches wide, it's a little closer to 22 and a half. So I'm going to cut the plywood to be 21 and a half, which will give me a half an inch on both sides gap. As far as the height, it's measuring at 8 3/4, so I'm going to leave a little gap there too, and I'm going to go 8 1/2. So piece of plywood I'm going to cut is 8 1/2 inches tall by 21 1/2 inches wide. All right, let's see how that fits. Beautiful. Now I'm going to go ahead and round off these edges so that these sharp edges do not poke a hole in my upholstery and these sharp edges don't poke a hole in me. Okay, now we need to drill a hole here and a hole here so that we can put bolts through them and into these inset threaded holes. So rather than measuring the distance, I'm going to go ahead and just take a little sticker here, Frosty the Snowman here, and I'm going to put it over these holes. And now when I take my board and I carefully put it in position, okay? Now I know if I drill here and I drill here, I'll be good to go. So for this next portion, we're going to be cutting up the 2x2 lumber into 6 individual pieces. I'm going to take this as an opportunity to break the fourth wall and admit that I'm not building this from scratch. I built this well over a year ago, and I'm just recreating the creation of this product. So I'm going to use the finished product, less the cushion, to help me describe what we need to do. Remember that this piece of plywood is 21 1/2 inches long, okay? So this piece is actually 21 inches long. So as you can see, the cushion fits right in this gap right here. So these 4 blocks need to be the exact thickness of the seat, okay? So that it can poke right through and fit snugly in this gap. So what we need to do is measure the thickness. And it looks like it's exactly 1 3/4 inches thick. Therefore, these 4 pieces need to be 1 3/4 inch thick. All right, so the next piece we're going to cut is this piece right here, okay? So it slides in between these 2 metal supports underneath the cushion of my bench. So it needs to be very snug, so make sure that you cut with precision. So for me, that's 2 3/4 inches long. Now, one note, maybe you don't have 2 support beams on your bench. Maybe you have just one big support beam underneath your bench. If that's the case, then instead of having 1 piece that slides in between the 2, you would cut 2 blocks and they would go on either side of your beam. So now we're going to determine the positions of our interior blocks. So I measured and marked the center of this 21-inch piece. I'm going to go ahead and put that right dead center of my seat, and I'll take these 2 blocks and I'll put them on the outsides and then go ahead and mark it with a pencil on both sides. And now I know where to glue my 2 interior blocks. These blocks fit right on the outside edge of the seat. I got this middle guy right here. I put a little glue on that. Okay, so that's right in the middle. And we're going to go ahead and clamp this guy right now too. The glue is now dry, so we can take off the clamps. Now we're going to take our bracket and put it onto the bench. We're going to clamp it into place. Then we take our pad with the M10 bolt already attached. Now you'll notice that I only have 1 M10 bolt on here. It's because I stripped this one out last year when I was originally building this. But that's okay. I got my M10 bolt on, and now that plywood is in position on the pad. Now we take the pad with the plywood attached, and we are going to put it on our seat. The pad is resting right here on top of the seat, and the bracket is centered on the piece of plywood. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and clamp it. Okay, now that we have the pad in the correct position on the bracket, I'm going to go ahead and mark it. And you'll see that I've marked where the 4 blocks go. So now I'm going to clamp the bracket onto the plywood in the positions that I marked. So now it's time to affix the bracket to the plywood. I'm going to be taking a 3-inch construction screw, putting it through the bracket and into the plywood, and taking another 3-inch construction screw and going through the plywood and into the bracket. So each of the 4 positions will look something like this. Now, this 3-inch construction screw barely will go into the plywood if I don't put a little countersink right here. So I'm going to be using a 1/2-inch spade bit to put a little countersink hole here so that this 3-inch screw can get down into that piece of plywood. Once I've done that for this position, I can take the clamps off and repeat the same process for the other 3 blocks. Okay, so this part's done. Now we just got to put a screw here and a screw here. We were using 3-inch screws, but now we're going to be using 2.5-inch screws. I went ahead and glued together 2 pieces of 2x4, and now I'm going to use my miter saw to cut them into 2 of these, which is just simply a block of wood with a 45-degree angle cut on it, and by adhering 2 of these on the back of the plywood, I will have a 45-degree angle pitch when I'm using the preacher curl attachment on my parallel bars. Okay, so now it's time to add these blocks to the back of our plywood. So we get that nice static 45-degree angle pitch whenever we're using the unit on our parallel bars. But before we do that, you need to determine how you want to permanently affix what we just built to your pad. So this is what I'm going to be doing. I have these screws in 5 different positions with washers, and that's on there solid. I'm not going to be using these holes for the M10 bolts at all. The reason being, because of the thickness of my bench seat, right, those M10 bolts are actually interfering with how this lays on the parallel bars. You have a different bench, you have a different situation. So this is what I'm going to go with. So now it's time to put these wedges on.